raise it up, blaze it up. These nuts, I don't give a fuck. Raise it up, blaze it up. These nuts, I don't give a fuck. Raise it up, blaze it up. These nuts, what you want now?
So today we're playing some Battlefield 4, and it kind of got me thinking about the entire game as a whole, from start to finish, you know, how this game has prospered across the years. Because if you think about it now, this game technically is somewhat old. Now, with yearly releases and bi-yearly releases, Battlefield 4 is an aged game. Even though it came out during next gen and it feels very modern and new, theoretically speaking, now that its life cycle is practically complete, it is somewhat of an old game. And after I played Battlefield 4, I immediately went ahead and played Battlefield 3. I was in a really Battlefieldy mood, so to speak, and it kind of spurred the creation of this video today. So whilst I was going through Battlelog for Battlefield 3, looking at all of the maps I would be interested in playing, considering there'd be enough players to do so, it occurred to me that there is such an array of maps on Battlefield 3 that are so good in quality. Like, there are games from vanilla and then the DLCs above them that are just downright impressive. Close Quarters, the entire DLC is fantastic. Aftermath DLC was insane. Endgame was pretty damn good. Armored Kill. And then it made me realize, whilst looking at the Battlefield 4 Battlelog, that wasn't the same case. Battlefield 4's DLC, comparatively to Battlefield 3's, was, in my opinion, absolutely terrible. And whilst these DLCs were new and exciting when they came out, now that I look back at them, I find it quite challenging to find a DLC which I found particularly impressive. Now, I look at China Rising and I think I'm never going to touch these maps ever. Maybe Silk Road once or twice. I look at Final Stand and I think, okay, this was cool at the start, but in terms of map design, it isn't all that amazing. Visually, it's stunning, but, you know, Operation Whiteout and Hammerhead was okay, but again, I lost interest really easily. I look at Second Assault and I think, well, these are just Battlefield 3 remakes, I can go back to Battlefield 3 for that. And then I look at Dragon's Teeth, and that is the only DLC that I look at and think, do you know what? I enjoyed this, and I really enjoyed every map, except for maybe Sunken Dragon. You know, Dragon's Teeth is the only DLC that I could say I've put tons of hours into, and I've really enjoyed it. And I started to realise why this is the case. And when comparing the two Battlelogs side by side, I arrived at the conclusion that the lack of a gameplay-centric theme or concept in a DLC is what causes it to fail or go down in quality. Now, there are two types of themes. There is a theme as in a location or an idea. So for example, in China Rising, we have the Chinese Outback. In Final Stand, we have the 2142 representation, but there is no gameplay-centric theme. Now, an idea of a gameplay-centric theme is in Dragon's Teeth, where infantry combat was deployed quite significantly within the entire DLC, and that's why many memorize it as a fairly good one. And the same can be said for Naval Strike, but I'm afraid naval mechanics isn't exactly everybody's cup of tea, which is why it didn't exactly sit well with the community. And this flashes on quite significantly in Battlefield 3. We see, for example, Close Quarters, which was purely derived off of the fact that it's going to be infantry only, it's going to be in indoorsy maps and somewhat outdoorsy maps, but in confined spaces, caused the DLC to be memorable and people enjoyed it. And the same can be said for Armored Kill. Armored Kill was purely armored gameplay. We even had tank superiority, which was a nice touch as well. And people enjoyed that DLC because it was designed around that gameplay mechanic. And you can see elements of gameplay mechanics in other DLCs, so for example Back to Karkand and Endgame, but it's not as focused in those areas. Where a DLC has directly focused its attention on a concept or gameplay theme is where it's done well. The best example of this in Battlefield 3 is Aftermath. Now, Aftermath does two things really well. Aftermath both catches a gameplay design concept, but also an aesthetic and theme-based concept together at the same time. The direct theme of Aftermath was this war-torn land which had just been hit by a devastating earthquake. And this earthquake had caused people to, lose focus, and soldiers on the ground had to go ragtag and throw together what they could. So for example, the Vodnik, which was somewhat of a ragtag with old metal scraps on it, it looked really cool, but at the same time, despite this theme being very much focused on the DLC, we saw that a gameplay-centric theme of minimal vehicles in most circumstances and lots of lanes and alleyways and points of contention for infantry gameplay coincided really well. So Aftermath for me I would describe as theoretically an infantry DLC because of the way it was designed, and the way it was designed was purely based off of the concept of the earthquake theme. And that is when you get a DLC to be perfection, in my opinion. Now, I haven't noticed a DLC in Battlefield 4 which both takes the idea of a concept such as an earthquake or incredibly strange weather or something like that, and then combines it with a gameplay dynamic such as infantry or armoured based gameplay. It seems to be non-existent at the moment, and I feel as though that's why Battlefield 4's DLC as a life cycle wasn't as impressive as Battlefield 3's. So how can we look to the future with this kind of thing? I'd like to see in the future for Battlefield 5 when DLC is considered an option for each DLC to adopt a theme. And it feels like Battlefield Hardline has understood this but given it a twist. They have made it so that each class gets a themed DLC. Now, although I think this is an okay idea, I'd rather prefer a DLC which is themed around specific areas or ideas as opposed to being refined for a specific class. But at least they understood the fact that a theme was necessary for a DLC to do well. And I feel like Battlefield 5 will have to make the option of having a DLC such as, for a wild example, some kind of nuclear fallout. So we're in these kind of nuclear radiated areas with dying trees and dead animals and all that kind of stuff, and blown up vehicles and houses with lots of, fire marks or radiation burns and all that kind of stuff. And you had, for example, a focus on infantry gameplay. And the infantry gameplay was very much kind of trench-like warfare, where the battlefield that was left behind, so for example, in open fields with trenches and stuff, was still there, just around this apocalyptic background. And that's how I feel like we can combine two things well together. So having a direct theme concept and then combining it with a gameplay theme is the only intuitive way to make a good DLC, and I really do hope that this is something we're going to be able to see in the future. So as always guys, I want to know your opinion on this. Do you believe that themed DLCs was the cause of such downfall in Battlefield 4 as in terms of an entire life cycle? And I want to know what you guys thought about that. I'm glad to be back with some more Battlefield gameplay, and I promise more is coming soon alongside squad videos. And make sure you check out every weekend, every Saturday or Sunday at 9 PM. I will be streaming. I'm doing a couple of extra ones now, but as of sort of next week, every weekend it will be a stream on YouTube Gaming available for you guys to watch, and I will schedule all of them so you'll know when and where they will be. So guys, it's been me, the Tactical Brit. As always lads, thank you for watching, and I will see you again in another video.